Testing, hello. Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Williams. I work with Elizabeth Kyle on her project this semester, and we're going to get to hear about that very soon. And then I wrote something for Elizabeth. It happens every now and then, all the time here at Geneva. A student says, I have an idea for an academic project. I want to run it by you and hear what you think. See, there's a problem I've noticed, and I want to solve it. It seems like there's this huge disagreement between pro-life and pro-choice people, you know? Like huge. I want my project to focus on that. It's time someone stood up and solved this issue. The answer is so clear. The professor says, now we're talking. Tell me, regarding this issue, what's your central argument? What's this answer you've discovered? The student says, I'm pro-life, okay? Does that make sense? Sure, says the professor. The student takes a deep breath, gives a rhetorical smile, then unleashes the idea. I think it's a really bad idea to be pro-choice. Oh, and that's the project's title too. Your project is entitled, It's a Bad Idea to be Pro-Choice. No, it's called, I think it's a really bad idea to be pro-choice. Once I prove my points using inescapable logic, there will be no more issue. The professor says, wow. The student says, I know, right? The professor says, once you've tackled abortion, please fix your gaze upon healthcare, and then for dessert, the Middle East. I'll do that in grad school, says the student. The professor thinks, please tell me you're leaving Geneva after graduation. Please don't say you're joining the higher ed program. I'm joining the higher ed program, says the student. 2 or 3 more years of me. Though Elizabeth Kyle's academic partner's project does focus on abortion, Elizabeth is not the student I just described. In other words, she's not going into higher ed. What I really mean is she's taking a different approach to the abortion debate, the story approach. Last summer and this semester, she has written a rough draft of a novel about abortion. Before she began, she and I talked about what the book might be and what it might do. I don't want it to be just for one side of the argument, said Elizabeth. I want both sides to read it. I want the book to pour out a patch of common ground so people can actually talk about the issue instead of screaming at each other. Oh, I said, so you want to do the impossible? Yes, she said. Now we're talking, I said, and then Elizabeth got to work. It's time for us to hear about that work, about Elizabeth's dream to do the impossible. After her presentation, there will be a brief Q&A, and now please help me welcome our friend Elizabeth Kyle.
Hi, it's so nice to see everybody, especially like the people who have mentored me along the way, all my professors who have really shaped my point of view, because I've had to read a lot, and like one of the slides I will be telling you that I had to read some really difficult literature, and the literature not always was about like what I wanted to hear. It helped me be able to shape a more rounded point of view. And that's basically what I wanted to do with my book, was have a more rounded point of view. So I'm going to talk about my book for a little bit. So basically, it's about an 18-year-old college student. It's her first semester, and she ends up getting pregnant, and her family disowns her. And she also loses a lot of friends along the way. She loses her boyfriend temporarily. And basically, I wanted to point out, like, from the mother's point of view, how, like, unexpected pregnancies, like, really challenge, like, mothers, single mothers especially. Because I find that pro-life people tend to focus more on the child than the mother's point of view, whereas pro-choice people tend to focus on the mother and not, like, the child. And so I wanted to show, and basically this book is like worst case scenario. There's a lot of people who have like a grandmother or parents willing to help with the child, but I wanted to show this is the worst case scenario, and this is probably some of the things that goes through a single mother's thoughts, because Antonia, my main character, she's fortunate to be 18. she has a lot more rights than, say, someone who's 14 years old or 16 in high school, because there's a lot of teenagers under social pressure have to drop out during high school. And whenever you don't have a diploma, you have to hope to have a GED, or you're going to be, working at Walmart for the rest of your life, unless you start your own business. But I wanted to show how unexpected pregnancies affect people spiritually, friendship-wise, family-wise, financially, socially, what kind of pressures they'll have to go through. And so basically my goal is talk about abortion in a way that encourages discussion, not fighting. Now, with my book, I wanted to try to pull off the most neutral point of view as possible, which is so hard to do because easily you have a point of view you're wanting to reach across, and you're just like, I naturally want to be didactic. I naturally want to be like, so here's my point of view, and you're going to accept it. But the problem is that the other side is not going to accept it. They're going to be like, I don't agree with it. Close the book, put it aside, and that's it. And I want to be able to see, I want pro-choice people to see the value in the baby's life. But I also want to talk to the pro-life people and be like, oh, you're not getting away this easily. Even though I may not agree with pro-choice, there's a lot we have to discuss about pro-life's point of view that is problematic, or some people's ideas that can be problematic. And basically, I want to encourage pro-life people to be more compassionate, because a lot of times I find that there's a short-sighted goal with pro-lifers. They're like, oh, the baby's born, it didn't get aborted, problem solved, I'm done. But it's like, what I've discovered, with economically, it is so hard unless, the mother has a foundation, a village backing her up. It is so hard for her to, keep going. And it's just throwing the baby into an orphanage or a foster home and calling it done is really not a solution. And there's a whole other umbrella of topics to talk about when it comes to foster cares and how that needs to be, as an institution, rounded, improved. How the adoption process improved. But I also wanted to point out religious hypocrisy, because a lot, like I mentioned before, it's with certain religious organizations, it's very we care about the baby, but we don't really care about the mother, because it's her fault, her problem, her sin. I'm stepping away, okay? But everyone makes mistakes, and some mistakes are more visible than others. The mother has to carry the sin of her and the man that slept with her. The man doesn't have to have a big belly and have social criticism, looking at him all the time, judgmental eyes. The woman does. And I want to point out that we need to have compassion and be like Jesus, when it comes to the lady who was accused of adultery. She had a sin, she was caught, and he looked at her with compassion. And then, of course, in my book, I also wanted to try not to demonize pro-choice people. And one of the things that I was so glad that Dr. Williams gave me credit for was I did mention the abortion, the Planned Parenthood clinic, basically. And I showed that they're just most of them are just doctors. They're just trying to do their thing, because so easily we find, with pro-life point of view, the worst case scenario where the baby ended up being born after a failed abortion, and the nurses tried killing the baby and hiding or something like that. But there's a process that I've done research on in clinics where it's you have to, basically the doctor's going to walk you through a process. And abortion, you might want an abortion, but they will be well, let's consider other options. And it basically was they're not immediately being let's kill a baby today. Even though I may not, most of us in this room will not agree with abortion. And I don't agree with abortion. They're not gung-ho to kill a baby. But basically, where did my idea come from? So, once upon a time, it was election season. Not this year. It was, I think, last year, whenever we elected our senator and governor, or no, state representative, I believe, one of the two. And I got a pamphlet in the mail from Planned Parenthood, and they were asking for a donation, and they were like, please, and this is just a summary, it's been a long ago, my memory is a little faded, but they were like, please give us money to save women's lives. And I was just like, so you're saying like abortion is primarily to make sure like women don't die like of childbirth or something like that. And I was like, okay, there's something wrong here, because statistically, from what I've understood, it's very minimal, especially with medical development, that we would need that. So I did some research, and the CDC said that in 2021 there were 625,978 abortions performed. However, there was, like, Cincinnati Right of Life said that in a period of 24 years of, like, people having abortions, only 1.14% was because they were saving a mother's life, which meant the majority of abortions was done out of convenience. Which is such a simplified way of saying it, because whenever you are a panicked mother, sometimes it feels like the only choice is to have an abortion. When you see your economic choices, you see your community falling away, you don't have much support, sometimes the easy way out feels like the best course of action to take. And also in the media, like, it's advocated heavily where it's like, if you're 18 and you're pregnant, your life's over, unless you get an abortion. And I started hearing like the other side of things. I grew up with mostly like, rural Pennsylvania, mostly a conservative community. I heard a lot from the pro-life side, and the pro-choice arguments I've heard were kind of like, oh, that's very reductionistic. It's just like, my body, my choice. Or like, well, it's my body, I can do whatever I want. And I'm just like, no, I don't see the rationale, especially when we know that a baby, according to, I think it was Yale University, a baby can survive 22 to 23 weeks, like, outside of a womb, with medical, like, intervention. What I mean, like, it can be 22 to 23 weeks old and survive outside the womb with medical intervention. So within 5 months, a baby can survive. And it's like, you have people like doing up to term abortions, and it's just like, but that baby is already a baby by the time like you're trying to get rid of it. But then I started hearing things from the mother's point of view. I started hearing YouTube videos about women who had to go through the single parent life as a teenager, and then I started doing some spiraling in my mind and thinking, what if that was me? And what would my world look like? And then all of a sudden things started looking bleaker, and then darker and darker the more I thought about it, and I was like, I understand now. I understand why some people would think this would be the last choice, or the best choice. And then I wanted to give a Bible scripture, Proverbs 15, 1 through 2. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise adorns knowledge, but the mouth of the fool gushes folly. That's basically the scripture that essentially was my goal in my book. It's like, you have so many people screaming at each other, not hearing each other, but if I could have something that's more neutral, but also points out the things that are wrong, it'd be easier to accept that kind of criticism than hear people be like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, or you're stupid, and whatever straw man fallacies you're gonna throw at people. So that's basically where the inspiration came from. Now, I'm going to talk about the authors I drew inspiration from. And yes, Dr. Zaba, mostly it's from your classes. Just last semester, I believe, we read Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. And I had this book idea longer than like a semester ago. It was at least 2 or 3 semesters ago I've had this book idea. But when I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, I was just like, oh my goodness, there's my book right there. Because within that work of fiction, not only did she criticize pro-slavery people, but she also criticized people who were for abolition, but she was pointing out their hypocrisy. And I was just like, there it is. And Abraham Lincoln did go up to her and was like, so this is the little lady that started the Civil War. It's like the book really caught on fire for socially, and I was just like, that's what I hope my book becomes. And then I also got inspired by Beloved by Toni Morrison because it was just so raw of a book. It was just like so hard to read because it was just, the content was brutal. There was so much violence, but yet I was like, that's what I think fiction should primarily be about, is being able to convey truth, the essence of it, and be able to show it in a story format so people can understand more. I'm now going to talk about the writing process. And step 1 I did was, of course, read. Dr. Williams told me, okay, so we're going to have you start reading books on both sides of the point of view because we want to know what's out there and we want to know, like, basically how to avoid writing like them or learn some aspects and learn how to write like them. And so I'm going to talk about 2 books, one from each side. And the first one might shock you because it's not inherently a pro-life book. It was not written in the modern era. And that book is, oh wait, I'm not going to talk about that right again. So I want to talk about the reason why we should read difficult literature, like I mentioned earlier. Like I said, we glean lessons from literature we don't religiously, morally, or politically agree with. We can learn the other point of view a little bit more clearly without having your side be like, no, this is what they think. It's like, no, I want to hear from them what they think. And sometimes the answers might shock you. And we can sharpen our minds when we look at the other side of the argument and be like, okay, so this is what they think, and how can I change, like, my logic to meet, like, their point of view, but then be like, I think this is the more correct answer. And then it humanizes our opponents and helps us become more compassionate. With YouTube, we see so many things of, like, crazy pro-life and pro-choice people doing who knows what in public, people filming them, and some of it I think is staged. I can't say some, and I can't say most, but there are definitely videos that are staged just to infuriate us. But I'm now going to finally talk about the 2 books, given that little note. And the first book is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now, whenever I was first talking to Dr. Williams about this, I was just like, should I read The Scarlet Letter? I didn't know too much about it, but I sort of knew what it was about. And for whatever reason, my gut was telling me The Scarlet Letter, The Scarlet Letter, The Scarlet Letter. And so over the summer, I was like, all right, I'm going to read The Scarlet Letter. And it captured the social shame of a woman who got pregnant because of adultery and how she was repentant of it, but she also had to struggle with the value of her own child. And there was a lot of psychological, like you could hear, like she could feel the people judging her, and she tried shying away, but all this time, the father was not known, and she wouldn't give him up. And it showed that all those years, while their child was growing up, she had to face the burden of everything, and he didn't. So, in this next point, it's easy to condemn a person with visible sin, but what if all of our sin was written on our forehead and we had to walk around? How many of us are, like, if pornography was written on our heads, would we start, like, judging each other, like, more harshly if like our sins were visible, but all sins are the same according to the Bible. And then of course there's unequal responsibility for a child, which was like super feminist of Nathaniel Hawthorne to like I was expecting that from him. Like I mentioned, she had to take care of that child, and with today, we have an absent father problem. 1 in 4 children grow up without a father, which means 18.3 million children in America. And then men often escape public humiliation, unlike the women, like I mentioned before, they don't have to have the stomach that tells people what happened. And then I read The Handmaid's Tale. Now, I have not watched the show, but from what I've heard from Dr. Coons, it confirmed my suspicion I don't want to watch the show. Now, I was pleasantly surprised about how much I like this book, because I've seen bumper stickers, activists like marching around wearing the red cloak and like the white hat, and I was just like, oh, I'm not gonna like this book. It's gonna be so hard to read or whatever. But I was pleasantly surprised by how little abortion was mentioned. The only time I can think of that abortion was mentioned in the book was they killed the abortion doctors whenever like the New Society came in. But most of the time it was talking about women and their roles in being mothers. And basically, some of the lessons I've gleaned from this is religion can be used as an excuse for control sometimes. Because we read into whatever we want to hear. Christianity has been used to support a lot of bad things. It's been used to support chattel slavery. And we have to be careful of whenever a trend comes in the modern era, are we going to search the Bible to support what we want to hear? Another thing I learned from this book is women can be objectified as tools for procreation. Women, almost as soon as like they become toddlers, are like kind of trained to be mothers. They're given the baby dolls. They're learning how to like take care of a child. And don't get me wrong, I would still want my baby doll, like if I was little. But men don't have that kind of pressure to be like fathers. They're doing their career thing, and if they get married and have children, that's fine. But women are always asked all the time, do you want children? When are you having children? You know, like, and it's like, it's a one-way thing, I think, most of the time. But I also have learned that pro-abortion advocates can be more compassionate than religious pro-life advocates. Because the pro-life advocates can be so quick to condemn a person for their sin, and then the pro-choice people are like, you made a mistake, and we want to like help you get rid of the mistake. And it's not the best way possible, but they're there for you. But pro-life people are willing to kind of just like shove quotes down your throat or call you a whore or whatever, and pass judgmental thoughts. But then I'm going to talk about the more lighter stuff now. We're going to talk about writing. So my goal was to write every day, and that did not happen. I had a summer. I picked the best time to get into this academic project thing because I got it confirmed during the spring semester, so I had a whole summer to start writing this book. And then, of course, I had this semester. And this semester, I had 19 credits to juggle while trying to write this book. And I wrote half of it, or at least half of 65,000 words during summer, and it was just such a relief. But still, 19 credits takes your energy, and then you have so many days that you don't write. So basically, the last week where my book was due, I was writing 2,000 words a day, trying to meet the deadline. And I also had to learn how to write a book, And layering the plots and characters was just like something that was so eye-opening to me, because whenever you're writing short stories, you have you have the goal, like you have the characters, you got your objective. It's quite easy. It's just like, not easy because I'm still like not good at it, but like it's not writing a book. Now, like the setbacks to the writing is the writer's block. So I basically had writer's block basically the entire time I was writing this. Like, there was a couple chapters I'm like, oh, I'm on fire now, what's going to happen? And then a couple thousand words come out. But then I'm like, oh no, oh, what's next? And of course, like I said, learning how to write a book for the first time is so complicated. And that's why I really liked Uncle Tom's Cabin, was because of the complexity. I'm losing my voice. I'm almost done, I promise. Yeah, the complexity. I loved it. It was like, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just like so many moving parts, so admirable, and I'm like, I want that to be my book. And then I had to, one of the hardest things, like I said, was being didactic, you know? It's like I had to try keeping an unbiased voice as much as possible so that both sides were able to hear my, like, what I'm trying to tell them without them being like closing the book and like throwing it away. And then another setback was writing from the perspective of a mother. I have no clue, like, what it's like to be a mother, and I'm never going to unless I become one. So I had to do some research as to, like, pregnancy stages, where you're gonna feel this, the feet are swollen, you start, like, having a hard time breathing when walking, and it's just like, Alright, and then here's the last step, and it's what I'm doing next. Revision. So we're gonna rip apart my book. Alright, so we're gonna fix the plot holes, and I gotta reorganize the timeline, and actually kind of organize the timeline, because there were some chapters where it was like, we were here, but in the next couple chapters, I was like, oh wait, it would make more sense if it was here. So I gave it to Dr. Williams, and I'm like, oh no. He's probably gonna be like, what is going on, timeline-wise? And then I had to evaluate the use of certain characters, because sometimes in the heat of the moment, you create a character and you're like, oh, it's gonna work out fine. And then you're like, wait a minute, why are you here? You're not really doing anything, you're just creating fluff. So we gotta get rid of that. Or at least make their point a little sharper. And then, basically, another thing, the main problem was I was so focused on the events of the book that I forgot to make my main character active. So she's got to start having some goals, and she's got to start acting up and becoming basically more interesting. And then finally, it's submitting the final revision to basically as many publishers and seeing who will take. And I have a publisher dilemma, because I think the easy way would be to sanitize the book and try finding a Christian publisher that will take it, because it's a pro-life book and it's gonna fit right in there. But then it'll get shelved in the Christian section, and I'm not here to preach to the choir. I'm here to preach to everybody. And there's a lot, I feel like maybe it's just my point of view, but I'm finding that most publishers are like kind of like on the more left, liberal side. And I have to try to see if maybe they're like more neutral publishers or conservative publishers, because I feel like they might be my best-ish shot. But then again, it's just like, people want to publish the fluffy stuff. My generation wants the romances and that sort of thing. So I'm gonna have to make this book more romantic. And then I'm gonna have to like, to cater to my generation, and then I'm gonna have to find a way to find someone who would take something like this. So it's scary. I don't know what's gonna happen. I hope it gets published, but I might have to go indie. I don't know. And then I'm gonna end my presentation on a couple of scriptures. Since we're talking about children, I thought it'd be, relevant. So the first one is Psalm 127:3. Children are a gift from the Lord, they are a reward from Him. And then Psalm 139:13 through 14. For you created my inner being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. All right. Should I say that for you? If anyone has any questions, Dr. Zabo.
So what narrative point of view are you using?
First person.
First person?
First person.
From Antonia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know, like, I guess a lot of people today have been naturally doing more third person, but I don't know. I wanted to be more close in her world, so first person was kind of like the more natural, I think, choice. Anybody else? Dr. Williams?
How did you deal with the writer's block?
I kept writing. I just forced things. Sometimes maybe I would think about it while bathing, or maybe I would just start like reevaluating where I was in the book and be like, okay, I'm here, I need to get to here, what do I need to make this happen? And then I went from there. Dr. Moore?
You talked about Hawthorne and Morrison as inspirations, but beneath them, who were your sort of inspirations prior to conceiving of this project? Are there writers who drew you into this world, this craft?
Like in terms of like writing or from like for my book?
Writing itself.
I've been writing ever since I was like, I don't know, like 6 years old. I started off with copywriting books, like, basically folding like paper and then recreating Robin Hood and stealing them and saying I made it. I don't know if that answers your question. I've always been kind of drawn to writing. Anybody else? Dr. Zeno?
Maybe it's not the case, but I wondered if Flannery O'Connor is kind of a model because she was speaking into a generation that did not see the world the way she did.
Oh, yeah.
Had to find a way in to speak the gospel.
She was definitely like inspiration, and sometimes I think she inspired me and I didn't realize it, but then I remember sitting in class and thinking, that's what I'm trying to do. Like, I just like, she's admirable because like to speak in kind of like a secular way to people who don't believe, but try to get them to believe. It's just like, yeah, that's me. Taylor?
How do you intend to, in making it more palatable to our generation, like you say, making it more romantic, how do you intend to make it that way without McDonald's and fine?
Well, there's already a couple in the book, the boyfriend, and eventually she does reunite with the boyfriend, and then they get married, and they basically stay together for the child, but they kind of grow in love and they grow spiritually together. I felt like they needed to have more scene time because if I just write straight like serious stuff, like a lot of people don't want to read serious stuff. It takes a special kind of person. It takes basically me, an emotional masochist, to sit through and be like, oh, I'm gonna read something so painful so I can like understand more things. But I felt like I needed to round out the relationship more, to show more of them. And then whenever they come back, I really wanted to show more romance between them. So it's not like I'm trying to necessarily bend to the crowd, but basically take what's already there and just make it easier for people to read, so it's not as dense. Yeah. Yep.
As you work to write your book from like a neutral perspective, did you often find yourself looking back on passages that you had written and needing to completely scrap it, realizing that you were speaking from your own perspective?
So what I'm getting at is like, did I ever read Bible scriptures and then realize I should change something within the book? I had a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry. When you're trying to write your book from a neutral perspective, did you have to scrap passages that you realized weren't neutral, basically? So.
Yeah, I did. I really did, because naturally I'm that person who's very passionate about what I have to say, and I'm just like, I want to tell you what I think, but I'm like, no. And actually, I ended up writing more from the opposite point of view sometimes, which was just like, almost like a gift, I felt like, because it was like, whoa, it felt like sometimes this book was written from a pro-choice point of view, but it was actually pro-life, which, given that most females today, I believe, are pro-choice, or at least there's a slight majority, because we're so divided. But yeah, there was times where I was like, I might have to cut like a sermon or something like that, because it was too much. Thank you. Anybody else? Bridget?
What was your revision process like? Were you revising kind of as you were writing, or was it more you wanted to get it down and then go back?
Yeah, I started revising, I believe, the first 5 chapters at least to 10, and I felt so bad because I sent the rough draft with some revision in there, and like I said before, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna confuse Dr. Williams, because part of it, there was actually one section that we discussed about that was slightly like confusing, and I was like, oh yeah, I added that last minute, it just needed to be paved out, because you're like, oh no, I gotta put a note in there that I might as well write it in there so I don't forget it later, so I'll just like write something, but then I gotta, like I said before, books are layers, it's like, I gotta be like, okay, so do I have enough of Danny in there? Do I have enough of Antonia's feelings? Do I need to include more of the family or X, Y, and Z? It's like so much to like juggle. It's so many moving parts of a book, and it's just like, it's amazing, but it's a challenge. Mom?
Did you do anything special to celebrate the book was over? It was finished.
I just didn't want to think for a while. I was 2,000 words like for the last week was just like, I was like, I can't blame anyone else but you, Elizabeth. Like, this is your own doing. Like, you know, it's just like, but it was, I think I lay down and just like mentally checked out for Thanksgiving break for a while. I was like, I need to do some papers. I got so much to write when I get back, but did I do anything? No, I did not.
One more question?
Taylor?
Did you become more or less passionate about this while you were doing it? Or like did the engagement of this difficult issue make you feel burned out, or did it make you more invigorated to tackle it?
I definitely felt more passionate about it at the beginning, because I think after a while, you just get so drained after 65,000 words that you're just like, what am I writing anymore? Where am I? Yeah, so it was, I feel passionate about talking about it now with you guys, and it's such a good reminder, me sharing my project and be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm writing for. But I have so much to do, and I understand now why books take like 5 years to write, because it's just so much, and I didn't want to even show Dr. Williams my rough draft, because I know he said the first one's for you and the second's for your mother, or something like that during class, and I'm just like, this isn't even worthy for my mother, and I'm showing it to my professor. Alright, I think that's everything.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.